Good morning. It is Tuesday, October 6, 2020. I'm Pastor Thor Ramsey with Center Church. This is Gospel for Five, where we take 5 minutes out of our day and focus on the gospel and the one who saved our souls. If you've been following along with us on Gospel for Five, you know that we're going through the book of Galatians to really get a condensed version of who the person of Jesus Christ is and what he accomplished for us. Yesterday we ended in verse 9, so we're picking up on verse 10, and Paul has been telling them that there is one gospel. There aren't multiple gospels. There aren't multiple ways to get to heaven. There is one way God has determined. That way is the person of Jesus Christ. He is the gospel. That's why there's no other way, because the gospel is a person. Jesus says, I am the way. So the gospel is a person. He's the truth. The truth of the gospel is a person, Jesus Christ. He is the life. We get life not from jumping through particular hoops or beliefs. We get life from a person that we turn to, Jesus Christ. So there is no other gospel. That was the point Paul just made in verses 8 and 9. Now he says in verse 10, for am I now seeking the approval of man or of God? So clearly, Paul is writing this in response to an accusation that he heard from possibly some of the people in the region of Galatia, that Paul was preaching the type of gospel he's preaching because he's seeking the approval of men. He's seeking the approval of people. Now, we're going to see why he was accused of seeking the approval of people, because, as I mentioned yesterday, the summary of Galatians is really the gospel is grace plus nothing. So in some people's minds, because you bring nothing to the table, because you add nothing to the gospel itself, because it's not God doing his part and you doing your part, Did I say that correctly? Hope I did the second time. But because the gospel is not God doing his part and you doing your part, people see that as a compromise. It's just, wait a second. You're saved by nothing you do? Nothing at all? Nothing? You bring nothing? That's controversial, even today. So in many people's eyes, well, you're just trying to gain the approval of people, because you're saying anybody can be saved. The most despicable human being on the face of the earth can actually find God's free grace in Christ by doing nothing except looking to Christ. Yeah, that's exactly the message of the gospel. Even the kids' devotional we're going through, I think it's called Small Devotional Big Beliefs, I think is what it's called. But that particular devotional made the point, because I'm going through it with my daughter Kate also, but with one of the last few times they made the point, you know what the most important part of a gift is? Salvation is a gift. You know what the most important part of a gift is? The giver. All we do is extend our hands and receive, but the most important part of salvation is the giver, is what God has done for us in Jesus Christ. So now that Paul had just really spoken some really forthright words to them, some no-nonsense words about the gospel, now he's asking them, so tell me now, I'm just out for the approval of man, or am I really conducting my ministry as if it were, as it said, before an audience of one? Before God, I'm doing what I'm doing for the sake of God himself. And I would venture to say, in our Christian lives, people-pleasing, man-pleasing as it's referred to, is one of the hardest things to overcome. If we can really push through that, we can be much more effective witnesses. Why? Because we're really not concerned about the reaction we're going to get. Now, that's not to say we are just unconcerned about, let me put it this way. We're not trying to be obnoxious, right? Because sometimes people can be obnoxious in how they state things, and they're not really concerned about people's reactions. Why? Because they're obnoxious. The obnoxious person is kind of oblivious to how people react to what they're saying. That's what makes them obnoxious. We don't want to be obnoxious. We just want to be fearless. So we can say things in gentle, loving ways, knowing that they might not be the most popular things in the marketplace, but we're saying them because our motives are what? For the sake of God and His gospel, and we know it's the best thing for the person we're sharing it with to hear. But that is a great challenge in the Christian life. We could really spend a lot of time there, but for now, what's God said to you today?